Welcome to Stargrind Tech Creation Story. This is a conversation where we meet and listen to creators that have taken part in the tech journey from an idea to a product that is commercialized. We also created this forum so that everybody in the audience can interact with our guests and ask questions. We will have a Q&A session in the end where you can unmute yourself and ask your question or give comments. However, you can continuously during the next 30 minutes write your questions in the chat and I will ask them to our guest in the Q&A. My name is Lina Source Emilsson. I'm one out of 4 co-founders to Stargrind. And this evening I am your host when we meet Viktor Nordmark, co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer at Hubert. Welcome, Viktor.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you very much for having me.
Super happy to have you here. So I think we start by you introducing yourself, telling us who are you and what is your background, Hubert, or Viktor.
Yeah, well, my name is Viktor Nordmark, as you said. I have a background in engineering. I studied electrical engineering at Uppsala. And during my 5th and final year, I attended Uppsala School of Entrepreneurship, where I started Hubert along with a friend of mine.
So what is Hubert?
Hubert has evolved into an automated recruiting platform, basically. Do you want me to go into what that means right away?
Yes, please do that. Tell us a little bit what it is. Everybody has an idea what your product that you developed is, and then we'll go back in time and go forward.
Yeah, sure. So the problem or the issue that we're trying to solve with our product is when you're recruiting for example, a customer support role, you often get 400 to 500 to 600 applications per open position. And then you as a recruiter has to sit and go through all these applications. You have to look at their CVs, you have to call them, you have to meet them, and all this takes time. It's very expensive and it introduces a lot of unconscious bias into the process. So we're trying to automate basically from 500 to 600 applications down to a short list of maybe 5 to 10 of the most interesting candidates. And we do this by having an automated chat session with all the candidates in the application process, where they go through a mix of open-ended questions that are competency-based. We also have like more traditional screening questions that you can screen out from. And we also measure a language part of, or we also take a language part into consideration when we're presenting a ranking of all the candidates that has been through this interview process. And in the end, we present the recruiters with the 5 to 10 most promising candidates. So they only have to assess them manually rather than the 500 to 600.
So let's go back in time a little bit now. So we are, let's say 2016, you are about to write your thesis for your master's at Uppsala University. And you are at Drivhuset and getting this introduction to the design thinking process where you get this idea. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, basically, pretty much.
So at that time, tell us a little bit about, because this is something that a lot of students go through. Tell us a little bit about what was the idea at that time and how did it evolve during the first year?
Yeah, well, when we were at Drivhuset, our task was to combine 2 different aspects or 2 different industries or 2 different problems into an idea. And this came from that I was thinking that when you're out flying, you could do something else while you're already sitting there and often doing nothing of value. And someone else came up with the idea that maybe you can do a market research study or a market research survey when you're sitting there. And then we spun on about that, and we came up with yeah, that's a pretty good idea, and maybe you can get some sort of reward, maybe an apple or something, because it's so expensive to buy stuff at Planes. So seems like a good opportunity to conduct a survey when you're already sitting there not doing anything.
So how did this idea, did it fly? Did it work? What happened during the first, what happened during the first year, and what made you take the decision to go in to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, that was our first idea. And then we basically ran around to different small-time business owners, and we're trying to create a incentive handling system for market research studies. So in market research, when you fill out a survey, you often get some sort of reward already, and that could be in the form of maybe 5 to 10 to 15 crowns for every completed survey, but you don't get that in your hand until you reach a sum of around some of maybe 100 or 200 crowns. So our idea at that time was to give you an instant reward in the form of maybe a bus ticket or a hot dog from Prestibyrån or something like that. So we were trying to build on that system. And we were deciding, because this was just at the end of our education, we were discussing a lot whether to apply for like real jobs or actually go through with this and try to raise some money. And we decided that we're gonna try it. So we, when it was time for graduation, we didn't have any jobs. We didn't have any capital or anything, but we figured we'd give it a few months at least to see where it takes us. And then we set out on a journey to try and find some sort of capital. So we went around to all the business angels, I guess you call them, starting first in Uppsala, where we were pretty successful, I guess. We at least raised some sort of interest from the angels that we talked to, and then we continued to Stockholm, where we found like our sort of dream investor, because he was in the right sector. He has just sold a big market research company, and he had exactly the right context that we were looking for to take this idea to the next step.
Is that common that you meet a person that is like, you know, okay, I'm going to invest in you guys, that like full on invest in you? Is it the normal way for startups, or how does startups get investing, survive?
Good question. This is one of the first. Well, it is the first time I raised capital. So yeah, I don't know if it's common or not, but for us, it's, yeah, I think we were pretty successful in that.
So what advice would you give to students or young entrepreneurs starting out this journey of finding capital to continue on a business idea? What is the best things that they should think about, and what should they really avoid?
Well, I think there's a lot of really unexperienced venture capitalists, or want to be venture capitalists out there, that doesn't really have an idea of what it takes to from a startup these days. It's a really tough journey to become successful and make money from a startup. And if you get the wrong angel in from the start, they will start placing demand on you very, very early. And I can see a situation where that becomes really unfruitful for both the investor and the entrepreneur. So I would say that talking to other people that the investor in question has invested in previously, and get their references, basically.
You should basically need your Hubert to find the right investor also.
Yeah, maybe that's a good next step.
So now you are in the situation. We are something around 2017, I guess now. Is it correct?
Yeah, I think we got hold of Bo, as his name is, in late 2016.
So, and you have capital and you have this idea about making research, what do you call it?
An incentive handling system.
Thank you. So what happens then during 2017? And what are your biggest learns from that time?
Yeah, well, we met up with Bo and we started working together with him. And the idea at the time was that we would take, or to get some sort of advantage from his connections within his previous company, which is called Sint. And it's a big market research company. I think at the time they had like 80 million respondents in their market research panel. And that would be a really good audience for us to start working in, we figured. But when we got talking to the new owners of Sint, which was Nordic Capital, they wasn't really that on board with the idea. So that plan didn't really work out. So we had to find some other way forward. And we were still, of course, in the same business area that we wanted to solve some sort of problem. And a common problem within market research and service in general is that you have a pretty low response frequency from the surveys. Well, if you send it out to 100 people, maybe 2 or 3 will take it. So we figured that the actual input method or the surveys themselves were a problem. So we started out building a automated interview, an interview engine to replace these surveys, and that was what later became Hubert.
As a teacher at university, I mean, when you have a course and you're going to get feedback, I know how hard it is to get people to sign in and give feedback back to the course. So did you have several different options, or did you know directly that this is what we're going to do? How did you decide how you're going to pivot your first idea?
I think we mostly went on where we had the most contacts into, and that's exactly where we started, actually, where your problem is with course evaluations. So we actually we sold this system to a couple of thousand universities and schools around the world.
Okay, so those were your first customers.
Yes, they were.
And how has that developed?
Well, universities or I think the public sector in general is really you have to have a lot of what is it called, tålamod, patience to work with them because they are really slow movers. They have to have like everything backed up in some sort of research articles and yeah, what have you. They're really slow adopters, and we grew tired of that eventually, and we switched target audience. Partly from that fact that they're really slow to work with, but also the fact that we got some traction within larger companies that we gained from our content marketing.
So if you tell us a little bit more in detail, you suddenly started to getting interest from another market. How did that happen, and how did you realize it? Was it an active move, or was it something that happened?
Yeah, we were doing a lot of content marketing and putting it out there on LinkedIn in different groups, and we were trying to be active promoters of our content, and that attracted the attention of some large companies. Siemens is one of them, who came back to us and said that we want to use your technology in our company to collect employee employee feedback data.
So if we go in a little bit to the tech you have created, the AI system you have created to conduct this service, what can you tell us about this journey of creating, just the programming, and what should one think about when one work with a product like this when you're developing it?
Well, when at the era of feedback, we had partly some pretty heavy AI stuff into the conversation part and partly into the analytics of the data that we collected. And those were really different technologies basically that we used for those parts. So we try to stay at the forefront of technology on both parts, but we were going like back and forth, trying to like improve the product in one of these areas all the time, and the priorities shifted all the time and still do, but I think we put the most attention where we think the product is most crappy.
So how do you work with this priority? Because it has to be a risk assessment in also how you invest your resources.
Oh, yeah.
And how you make your priorities. So how are you reasoning around that in Hubert?
Well, we try to go for the low hanging fruit all the time. So where we see that this can, if we pull this lever, our value can increase or our value proposition can increase. And that's the levers that we're trying to pull all the time. Of course, you have to take into consideration the time that goes into it, but also the reward that you expect from putting in that time.
So if you would do this differently, this journey, or let's say, not, let me reframe, not differently. If you would given the opportunity to do it again and give yourself advice along the road, what would you tell yourself?
Well, when we started out the feedback journey, we were trying to reach, or we were trying to go big from the start. So we tried to start focusing our attention on the English market, because we stood in front of a major decision early on if we're going to develop this in Swedish or English, and we chose English because that's a larger market. But it proved that that was not the best idea, because the market that we had in place was far away from us physically, which meant that we couldn't really get the casual conversation going with a lot of our clients that we could if we choose Swedish instead, which we eventually went back and changed the main language of Hubert into Swedish. And that led us to having a much closer relationship with our clients, as they were like sitting next to us at that case, instead of like 8 hours time difference. So that would be probably one of my advices to myself.
So this basically means that you kind of went back to what the things is that you learn within the innovation process, that have focus of the need close to the market, so you can really work close with your customers and keep it, and with the owners of interest. So, and another question I have is, when do you know it's time to release? Because you develop these beta versions, and how do you, before you release your product, how do you continuously developing it so you know that you meet the needs of the customers? How did you work with that?
We have always tried to release extremely early, and that has both its advantages, but of course disadvantages as well. But I think that's in general a pretty good philosophy to have, to try to release and try the functionality live on the audience that you intended for very early to get the feedback, because there's no like risk that as an early stage entrepreneur, you get the notion of, oh, what if this explodes and goes worldwide, and the world will see that I don't have all the functionality that we promise or that we should have. But that risk is non-existent, because it goes a lot of effort into marketing products, and you can just put your stuff out there, and the risk of anyone actually finding it is pretty small. So why not do it? For the small audience that you have, maybe they can give you some advice.
So basically, don't wait for perfect.
No, you should always be a little bit embarrassed of your first beta version. That's our philosophy when it comes to releasing.
But how do you know when you're just enough embarrassed and not being, wise? Embarrassed.
That's a good question. I will let you know when I have the answer.
So you're an engineer.
Yes.
You have your degree from Uppsala University's civil engineering educations, and today you work as a chief marketing officer. So
yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, also a good question. But I think it was when we met our first investor there, Bo. He when we were at the first meeting, or the startup meeting. So we had everything, or sort of arranged, that we were gonna do. So we merged with him and another guy, and then we were at our first startup meeting, and we went around the table, and he asked us, so you guys, what can you do? And we told him, like, yeah, we're engineers, we can't really do anything. And then he told us that, okay, then I will decide for you then. And you, Viktor, you will become the marketing guy, and you, Eric, you will become the product guy. And that's stuck ever since.
So it sounds like Bo has been part investor, but part mentor also in.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So what is your take on mentors?
My take on mentors, yeah, one good lesson that I have for myself is to sure, you should listen to their advice and to really consider it, but don't always go for advices. I've been in a couple of occasions where I've listened too much to my mentors and didn't think for myself enough, which has caused some trouble.
Where do you go as an entrepreneur if you find yourself in a trouble? How do you handle when you run into, it can be a trouble of taking advices, it can be a trouble of whatever comes your way, a customer, or what are your advice to fresh entrepreneurs to deal with these obstacles or even walls that comes into your life?
Yeah, well, mostly to spend as little time as possible to try and solve the issues. I've had a tradition of trying to fake it until you make it, and that works most of the time, to be honest. But yeah, you should, I think, don't think too much. Just try to solve the problem in the fastest way possible to get forward, because that's what you have least of as an entrepreneur, time.
The more decisions you take, the quicker you take them, the more you will learn, but also the more mistakes, but the more time you will get it right also. Is that basically what you're telling us?
Basically, yeah, and try to learn from your mistakes.
So it's a question about quantity here.
Something like that, yeah.
We have a question here from Juan. He says, how do you find new customers? We're going to have follow-ups, but we start with that one first. How do you find new customers?
Well, right now for the recruiting platform, we've established what we have as a target group. So we started out really broad, and we basically reached out to all companies that were doing some sort of recruitment, and preferably high volume recruitment, because that's where the highest volume is. But we're trying to small now to decrease the funnel of our target audience. So right now we're only doing or we're only building the product for logistics roles and customer support roles, and those companies are pretty easy to find. And as we have a service that is aimed at the recruiting function of companies, we basically always target the HR manager or CHRO or HR manager. Because those are the people that partly take the decision and partly think a lot about the issues that we're trying to solve with our product.
So Juan continues here. What is the priority in terms of activities to reach and catch their attention?
I think most of our clients comes from cold email marketing, or cold just sending them emails basically and telling them about our product. But I don't know how much that comes from. We do a lot of like LinkedIn campaigns, and we're doing a lot of content marketing that we're putting out on LinkedIn. So we're trying to build a brand at the same time, but that's a little more longer perspective on those kind of activities, as well as trying to SEO optimize the web page and try to rank for the right keywords and so. But yeah, cold email marketing goes a long way.
So how do you evaluate if you are successful, for example, on a content marketing, on cold emails? I guess is just numbers. How many emails do you have, or like cold contacts do you have to take to get one positive? Do you have a feeling for that? How many emails to get positive response?
Yeah, we have some sort of, or we do have a process that's, or rather a system that measures all the email activities that we do, and we have about, I think, 30% open rate of our emails, and about maybe 15% response rate, and then I think 2% become meetings. So for every 100 sent emails, we get 2 meetings.
So how long time does it take to close the deal then? What do you have any tips on how to close the deals?
Yeah, well, we tried a bunch of different methods, but it really helps if you can present some sort of ROI on your product. So we can pretty easily calculate how much time that goes into recruiting right now, and present them those numbers during our first meeting, and ask them, does this seem like a reasonable guess? And oftentimes they say, yeah, that looks somewhere in the proximity of what we're spending on recruiting. And then we show them our pricing, which we aim at being 1/10 of that cost. And that's, I think that simplifies the conversion rate, or improves it significantly, because we didn't have that calculation before, and we have seen a large increase in our conversion rates since we introduced that into our meeting process.
So we are starting the Q&A session now. So I can see that we have questions from Ahmed and from Juan, and you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask the question. And if you don't unmute yourself, I will ask the question that is in the chat, but you're more than welcome to unmute yourself. Okay, I ask the question. So we have here, what are the markets globally? that you are in now and are looking towards? Could you give an example of challenges and localizations and adaptation of your technology in foreign markets?
Yeah, so we're just about to open up the UK market right now. We haven't really started that with the recruitment product yet, but I have some experience from going global from the feedback adventure that we were on previously. And yeah, the biggest obstacles with going abroad is basically to have some sort of presence there. It is much easier when you have a digital product that you can just sign up for on a homepage. But it really helps if you have some sort of feet on the ground, I would say, in the foreign markets. And that presents a really big challenge, especially for early stage startups who can't really afford the high salaries that they have in the US and the expensive offices, basically.
So what are your advice how to do it then?
Start
to
up.
Get the feet there.
How to get the feet there? I don't have enough experience really to answer that, but try to stay digital as long as you can, and make sure that you really have traction in the new markets that you're trying to force yourself into before you take any decisions on whether to invest in a new office.
We have another question here. Your advice about the idea validation and commercialization of tech ideas, since it's sometimes easy to have a technology idea and go into the technology work of it, perfection of it. So I guess the question is, what is your thinking about validating your idea? The person who asked it can come in and correct me if I didn't understand it correctly.
Yeah. Hi.
Cool.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. How are you doing? Yeah. It's basically about how what you call it, an entrepreneur can control their excitement to go into deep the technology and develop and build awesome products, and at the same time balance it with like the idea validation and be realistic with the commercial value of it. So how you do that balance and
yeah, I think that's a really common trap to fall into when you're trying to perfect your product way too much before going to market with it. So I say just do it as soon as you possibly can. Try to set what is the MVP of your product? What functionality do I need to go to market? And when you have that functionality sort of in place, or if you can fake it in any way, you should do that, because developing takes time and is really expensive. So the sooner you can measure that there is some sort of need for your product out there, the better.
Another question that we have got here is, if you want to share an advice to students in Uppsala in terms of finding investors, mentors, or professional networks, what would it be? So it's basically 3: investor, mentors, and professional networks. How do you find them?
Yeah, so investors, I think Uppsala has a pretty small network of investors. So I think there's like four or five names, basically, that if you talk to them, you have a good start. And if they don't want to invest, they can probably point you in the right direction from there. And I think you can get those connections from like Drivhuset or Base 10 or Connect.
UC.
UV. Those are pretty early stage investor.
Almi.
As well. Yeah, Almi. Some good guys at Almi.
Yeah. So how about mentors? How do you find a mentor?
That's harder, I'd say. But yeah, try to search out some seasoned guys or girls that you look up to and are in the right industry and you think can give you advice, and basically just call them or email them or write to them on LinkedIn and ask them. The worst you can get is no. And same there, that you probably have to try like 50 times to get another meeting and see where that takes you. You can't really be disappointed if you get a no either.
So regarding network, how should one think about building the professional network? What is a constructive way of doing that, so you don't, bleed time and energy that can be invested somewhere else?
Yeah, well, I've been to very, very few like networking activities overall, and so, no, I'm not really in a position to answer how to build a network. It just I think it comes pretty naturally when you just striving forward and yeah, trying to become successful or try to make it, or trying to build a business. I think that comes pretty naturally when you're in that environment. If you hang out in the startup hubs, and you will meet people there at the coffee machine, and it's often pretty easy to talk to people in the entrepreneur audience. Yeah. Especially in Uppsala, because that's a really, really limited crew. So everyone knows everyone. And if you have any questions or you need help from someone, it's often pretty easy to get that help, or to get the right connections, or to be pointed in the right direction.
So actually your advice is find a place where you have people who care about what you do, and that you can add value to, and they will add value to you. So don't stay in your home office. Try to get out as soon as we can.
Yeah,
and find another office, some hub, somewhere where people doing the same thing as you are located.
Yeah, I think that's pretty decent advice.
Cool. Okay, so I would like to get you a little bit back to the investor Bo, because this I'm interested in. I'm going to ask you. He stayed with you. Why have he told you why he decided to invest in Hubert and your idea? And then when you ran into the situation where the new owners didn't want to invest in you, he decided to stay on and continue to and give trust and believe in your business idea. Have he told you why? And or actually, you can tell me that. You can also, if you don't want to tell us why, tell us how do an investor think?
That's pretty hard to answer. But in our case, we were really lucky, because we met him just at the right time. He just got a big lump of cash just laying around, and he was looking for ways to invest it. And we also had the luck that he had the exact same idea that we have with the incentive handling system. And he already got on board a developer guy. So he was looking for the rest of the team, basically. And there we were, fresh out of school, sure, but I guess he saw something in us, or at least he thought we were nice or good guys or something. I'm not sure, actually. I have to ask him sometime.
So we are coming soon to the 45 minutes we have together here today. But before we leave you, I would like to know about your future, or rather the future of Hubert, and what you are planning, and what your challenges and what your opportunities are that you want to share with us, your thoughts around the future.
Yeah, well, it's really a constant struggle, and you can't really be sure that you still have some sort of company in a year from now, or even 6 months from now. But we're doing a good sized effort to make it in the UK markets right now. We have a lot of traction in Sweden, so things are looking pretty good, but it's always uncertain what kind of competitors you have in a new market, and how how the new market will react to that. And we do have a lot of, or a few major development issues that we haven't solved yet, and those are pretty considerable challenges, which will lead to us not having a business in maybe 6 months or a year if we don't solve them. So yeah, you're trying to build an airplane as you're falling, basically, when you're in a startup.
Oh, that's a mental picture. COVID, the situation changed a lot for a lot of companies. Would you like to comment on your market and what COVID meant for your business?
Yeah, so we had pretty recently made our pivot into recruitment when COVID struck, and at the start we were really bummed about it because we knew that fewer companies were gonna recruit. So we thought that was really bad luck. But it turned out that even though the fewer companies actually do recruit, the employment rates have gone up, which has caused the job market to sort of tighten up. There are fewer jobs out there, but the application volumes per open position are higher than ever. So for us, it has been pretty positive, although of course it's never a positive thing to have a pandemic on your hands. But we've been pretty lucky in terms of like timing and yeah, how everything played out eventually.
Thank you, Viktor. Thank you for coming to Stargrind and for letting us ask all of these questions and learning from your experience and actually see how an idea that starts during your studies can build and grow into a business.